Hey, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith, and if I got a red eye, I've been rubbing it. I don't know, I got something in it, so just ignore that, and I'll try to too. Welcome first to all of the new people, both on YouTube and on Patreon. Going to talk here in a minute about fake instructors. I think it's a big problem. It's a big problem in every. I think probably in every profession or every realm of life. You know, there are always more people that want to act like they know how to do something than those who actually do, and they can be dangerous to listen to. So we'll talk about that in a minute. For the new people, again, welcome. Great to have you here. I encourage you to participate by commenting in the comment section. If you want to, you don't have to. Just a couple of things. Please be nice, be polite, be courteous to others, to me and to others. Don't call people out. Don't be rude. I do block people. I will dump people if it looks like they're just coming in to start an argument. I don't allow that. I have to do that occasionally on YouTube. Rarely have to do it on Patreon. I'm sorry that I had to do one on Patreon just yesterday or the day before sometime. And it's really too bad. I don't like to do it. But you know, if you say something, and I made a video a couple times back about, courtesy and being polite and the importance of it, not just in daily life, but in an SHTF situation, because you're discourteous after there's no rule of law, and it can be deadly. But I'm big on that, and occasionally somebody might step over a line, and if I say, "Whoops," I think you just kind of said something there you might want to take a look at. It's if they say, "Oops, didn't mean to," I'm not a 100% hard ass, just maybe 99%. But didn't mean to, sorry, blah, no problem, But if you come back and argue with me, okay, you're gone. Don't need your dollar. Anyway, that's for just that very, very small. I think I've only done it twice on Patreon, and I hate to do it because very often those people have something to contribute. Anyway, but my house, my rules, all that. I don't go into your house or your channel and tell you how to do things. So that's it. Welcome. Oh, one more thing before I get into fake instructors, and that is I know about some things and I don't know about some things, and many of the things that I don't know about have to do with computers. And I am always realizing that I miss comments from people. And I hate to do that. They don't always show up on my phone, and that's usually what I have. And then, I'll occasionally look to the comments that I haven't responded to, and I like to respond to comments. I really do. I don't always have time to give a full answer, but I want to give you a heart or a thumbs up or something to let you know that I read it. I appreciate you being a part of things. And that's an important part of me. I know that many people don't expect that. Many of you don't expect me to do that, but I just like to do that. And so I occasionally will see, it'll pop up, not necessarily because I think about it, but it'll just pop up, comments you haven't responded to. And here's a slew, weeks of comments that I never saw. And so I don't want you to think that I was just blowing you off or I was rude. I just didn't see them, and so I apologize. Okay, now to the important thing of the day. Fake instructors. I'm going to tell, I've made one and put it over on Patreon that I got a little bit farther into the weeds about some things that I won't get into here. And I thought about just uploading it here, but I think I'm going to make a slightly different one, but it'll still reach the point without getting into some of the particulars that I want to save for Patreon. If you want into the dirty little details, it's over on Patreon. I want to tell you a couple of stories. And I think probably anybody who's ever had an experience can relate to some of these. Some of the new people can't, but they're the ones that need to kind of be warned about this, because the preparedness world is full of people who have assumed the role of teacher and instructor and guru and all sorts of things, who have never actually done what they've said. And they can say, well, how do you know that? When you've done something, you can tell whether somebody else has done it. And those of you out there who have done it know what I'm talking about, right? And you can tell when somebody hasn't. A couple of stories here. Back, I went to DEA school in the late 70s, and I was not with DEA. I was a local cop, and this school was for local cops, local experienced cops. It wasn't the DEA school that they put their new baby DEA agents through. It was the school that they bring experienced cops in, locals, to teach them the federal drug laws, and that was basically it. All of us were experienced people. Most of us experienced city cops. So we were pretty hardcore, pretty salty, and it was a good time. I mean, we went out there and we learned some things. This was at the time that it was right after the Cuban boat lift, and Carter had allowed Castro to empty his prisons into Miami. And we saw the influx of a different kind of criminal than we had ever seen before. The Cubans came in. They were much different. Those of you who have seen Scarface, kind of like that, to be honest. There's a lot in that movie that was stupid, but like most movies. But a lot of it, it gave you an idea. Shortly behind the Cubans started coming the Colombians. And over on Patreon, I explain all about how what was happening with the international drug trade at the time, why we were now ramping up. We were starting to see cocaine come into America because of the China white that had come out of Southeast Asia had dried up when we came out of Vietnam. It was replaced by a coarse heroin out of Mexico called Mexican brown, and it caused a big need. The junkies up here were just screaming because they didn't have any quality drugs to shoot up, So this opened up a market, and I could go on to hours how that happened and the complicity of certain people here and that. But now we're seeing cocaine coming out of South America. So this is why there were so many drug units ramping up to address this. And it was also at the time that the DEA had just switched over from what it had previously been called the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs to DEA. So they were starting this program because they needed all of the locals, the experienced cops, to be a part of this new war on drugs, right? And so they put together this school to teach all the locals and try to get us on board and help them out. Well, we went away somewhere secret, and went through this school, and it was, I won't even say how long it was. It was fairly comprehensive. But it was a good time for the most part. In the daytime, we sat in class and we listened to the DEA instructors tell us about the laws and things they were coming up with and certain tactics that they were able to use as feds that we didn't have, available to us as locals, and how we could, they were more than willing to give us their assets and things like that, blah, blah, blah. But, it was semi-interesting. We could sit there and then, when it was over, we'd go out to dinner and then hit the bars and spend the rest of the night until closing time in the bars and the go-go joints, right? It was a good time. And we got along really well with the instructors because most of the guys who were instructing from the DEA, they'd been out there, they'd been on the streets, they were experienced people, so there was an affinity there, a mutual respect. They got along just fine. Well, one day a guy comes in, and man, he stood out. And he stood out because he was trying to act like what he wasn't. And he came in, and he was this very officious, what he thought was a hard-ass, gruff voice, and you could tell he wasn't in shape. He was kind of pudgy around the edges, and had a close cropped hair, and that made him kind of military looking. Well, we were not a military looking bunch. We had hair down, we were ratty looking because we fit in with the people that we were dealing with. And where I was assigned was the motorcycle clubs and things like that. Well, so he comes in and he starts talking. Now he he was teaching a compliance class. The reason that I remember that is because nobody wanted to take it. And what that means is the compliance was how to make cases on doctors selling diet pills to housewives, soccer moms and things like that. Nobody cared about that. Nobody wanted to do it. And so we just went because we had to, but he was all into it, man. It was just very important to him. And we would just listen in amazement as he threw around all these terms. He knew all the terms. He knew all the lingo. He knew all the things that he thought made him sound, like an old salt. What he didn't realize, it just made him sound ridiculous because we were the ones with experience, and we didn't talk like that. We just talked normal. But so we thought, who is, and also he would come in wearing this big, he liked to show his gun a lot. And he carried a chrome, or whatever it is, 1911. Well, first off, we all carried guns. Most of us carried multiple guns. There were enough guns in that room, to take over a small country. And you couldn't see any of them, and none of us had a chrome gun, but he thought that, it was the latest and greatest. So we said, who is this guy? Well, because we had a good relationship with the instructors, we asked them, who is this moron? And they told us. They said, well, you see, Carter realigned some of the federal agencies. And one of the ones that he realigned was the Department of Agriculture, and it put some of the people, it left them without jobs. This guy was one of the ones that it left without a job, and his GS, I think that's what it's called from memory, his GS level was such that he was a supervisor. They couldn't let him go because once you got a federal job, you never let go, right? And they had to find him a spot someplace else. And because the DEA had switched over from BNDD, they were growing. And so there was all sorts of slots. Well, he wasn't able to do anything. He didn't know anything about drugs. So naturally, they made him an instructor, right? And so he was going to teach compliance. And we said, well, what did he do? And they kind of looked funny, and they said, well, he inspected pickles. So we were instructed by a pickle inspector who outside, and here's the thing, to anybody who didn't have the experience, I'm sure he went around acting very important to people who don't know any better. And for people who didn't, he probably gave a lot of speeches at, high schools and clubs and things like that. And I'm sure many people went away going, oh, wow, this guy was really something, man. I mean, he had this big shiny gun, and he knows all the words and the lingo, and he was super cool. And he's the tip of the spear of the war on drugs. And, and didn't realize he was just a clown. Okay. Sadly, a lot of people learn from that. I'll tell you a second story. Years later, I published a martial arts magazine, and I was driving down the street locally or somewhere, and I looked up, and there was a new, so I kept in touch. I knew all the martial arts schools and pretty much all of the senseis, the owners, and everything like that. And I was driving down a main street, and I noticed that there was a sign up over a storefront, and that's where so many of the kind of, non-legit martial arts schools are, and storefronts. Excuse me. And so I looked up, and there was this big sign that said Shenhua Taido. Well, I never heard of that. And so I saw that there was people dancing around in there, and what I call pajama dancers. And they were wearing the skirts like the Aikido guys do, like Steven Seagal. Sometime I'm going to tell a story about Seagal. Mark's over there behind. He just gave me a thumbs up because he's heard the story. He could tell you his own stories about people who teach things that shouldn't be teaching but act like this shit. So anyway, I stop off. I go in there and I see them doing all their misdirecting stuff and stuff like that. And I watch for a few minutes, and pretty soon the sensei that turned out to be the owner, he comes over to see who I was. Probably thought I was there to sign up. So he's talking to me. I introduced myself. I'm there to see what they were and what's going on, and of course I want to sell him an ad in the magazine. Plus I want to see what's going on. So he was kind of in the middle of the class, invited me to come back another time. I did. So I came back, and he wasn't teaching, but another class was going on, so he and I could talk. And we were being, very, very nice to each other because he was hoping to get a write up in my magazine. I was hoping to sell an ad, and we were both kind of feeling each other out. And I'd never heard of Shinhwa Taido, and so he explained that it was some kind of super Aikido. Now, Steven Seagal was his hero, which told me everything that I needed to know right there, and probably tells a lot of you. If there's anybody out there that really likes Steven Seagal, I don't mean to offend you, but I'm going to tell a story someday that's going to give you a little enlightenment on Mr. Seagal. So he's talking to me about the Shinhwa Taido being just a super Aikido, and how it's possible to get people to defend yourself against deadly attacks without hurting the other person. Well, I was never concerned about not hurting the other person. If somebody attacks me, they're going to get hurt, and whatever. But he goes into this about we teach all this kind of stuff, and we teach police, and we teach military, and we teach the police how to get people out of cars without hurting them. And I said, well, okay, I've gotten people out of cars. And anyway, you want to show me some of this? He says, yeah, I'll show you some of this. So he starts showing me some of these things. Well, it was a bunch of junk. It was worthless. And he didn't realize that he was talking to somebody who had actually done what he was professing to teach people how to do. And so our conversation kind of evolved, as you can imagine. And he said, he talked about how he liked to concentrate on pressure points, right? Pressure points, and I don't know, energy meridians and all sorts of esoteric stuff, that yeah, sounds great, and it gets people to join your classes if they are looking for something mystical that they don't have to really fight, right? So he says, for instance, I can, if you throw a punch at me, I don't have to hurt you in order to control you. And I said, really? Okay. He says, go ahead and throw a punch. Well, we're surrounded by his class, and everybody's watching, right? And I was torn between, being real with him and not wanting to embarrass him in front of his class, because why do that, right? He seemed like a nice guy. So I go, well, okay. So I throw a super slow punch all the way back, big old roundhouse punch that they all love because it gives them plenty of time to show, what they're gonna do. I mean, you could see this punch coming from forever. It looked like I was picking something off the floor behind me, and I come around, big old sweeping slow motion punch, and he steps in and he does something, and he traps my arm, and then he digs a thumb into my elbow, or right here in the bicep. And he says, and then he looks at me expecting something to happen. And I'm just looking at him. And he says, do you feel that? And I says, yeah, I feel you pushing your thumb into my arm. He says, well, there's a nerve in here that he couldn't remember the name of it, but it's the median nerve. He says, there's a nerve in here that I can, if I push it hard enough, I can paralyze your arm. I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, well, go ahead. So he says, okay. And so he pushes harder and harder and harder, right? He says, okay, if you feel that. And I said, well, yeah, I feel you pushing hard on my arm. And he said, well, boy, you have a very deep one. Now, people are made somewhat differently, but for the most part, we're all made pretty much alike, And I doubt that I had a particular deep one. I mean, I'm not a horse, right? I'm not a big muscular guy. I mean, I worked out all the time, so, I had good muscle tone, but I was not one of these muscle-bound guys. And I think he could have found my median nerve pretty quick if he'd really, really known what he was doing. Well, he kept at it and kept at it and kept at it, and he said, well, I guess it just doesn't work on you. And I thought, well, if it doesn't work on me, what kind of day are you going to have if you needed it to work on me and it didn't work on me? So I kind of let it go. And he said, well, what would you do? And I said, it doesn't matter. I didn't want to get into that. I still want to sell him an ad. No, no, no. What would you do? And all of his people are watching, right? So I said, well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on a lot of things. You can't say exactly what you would do, depending on your environment, what's around, how much you want to respond to the person. He says, well, just show me something. I says, okay. So I says, go ahead and throw a punch. And so he threw a punch. And I just came through with what we call an enter hammer block. It's nothing more than coming through like this. And many of you, it's taught in some systems. It's not taught in other systems. I teach it in mine. You come through, and all you do is you usually have two bones in your lower arm, the radius and the ulna. The ulna is the outermost, the larger one. And just come through, and you just hammer that right into the attacking arm, right? Well, what that tends to do is to keep that arm about. But then as you have this hand up like this, and I know you can't really see it here, as you keep this up, and just in case it comes through, you can just drop this. First off, you hit their arm, you just drop this through and take it right into their ribs or up into their, whatever. Well, I came through and I did that, and you would have thought I'd hit him with a 2x4. He yelped and went, ah! And he held his arm, ah! And I was embarrassed for the guys looking around like, what are you doing? And he looked at me and says, what did you do? I says, well, as we call it a hammer block, I just, came through and I blocked it. And that's all. No. What did you do? There was something. I felt energy. I said, no, it's just, what it is you meet force with greater force. It's like hitting a baseball. If you swing harder than the ball is coming, the ball is going to go out in the field, right? And so that's all it is. When somebody's coming at you, you meet it with greater force. I don't think he ever really believed me, because he couldn't believe that so often it just comes down to force. I know that everybody likes to be tricky and say, oh, I can access all these nerve points and pressure points and stuff like that. And sometimes it's just a matter of force. The problem here, he was another one. This guy was a black belt in Shinhwa Taido. He had his own school. He had all of these students around him believing everything that he said. And do you know why the people have a tendency to believe that? Because it works on all of the students who don't want to make their instructor look bad, because they want their next belt promotion, right? There's something in the Japanese martial arts called an uke, and that's like the helper, the guy that goes up, when you want to demonstrate something, come up here, and and then they know what's going on, and so they're able to go through the flow of the technique without you having to hurt them, but there's an old saying also that the main job of an uke is to make their instructor look good. Not in good schools, but in most of the schools, which is 95% of all martial arts schools, which are nothing but hui. And so they kind of go along with this. And that makes everybody who watches it believe it. And these people go around and they put on seminars and they put on classes, and their uke does exactly what they're supposed to do. And they look like they're throwing people around and, with the energy of the universe. And then people leave. And first off, they join their classes again. They tell them, oh, I want to learn that stuff. And then they tell everybody how wonderful this instructor is, and they believe it. And thankfully, most of them survive the rest of their lives never having to use it, because if they did have to use it, they'd find themselves really disappointed as they were getting their butts kicked and all this secret crap didn't work. Anyway, my point here, I know a lot of you guys out there are laughing hard right now. Those of you with experience and stuff, you've seen this stuff, right? And there is a responsibility, in my opinion, on the part of an instructor to teach what they know. And to me, that means teach what you've done. It doesn't mean, and I know the world is full of people, colleges, right? High schools, everything else in the world. Mark could tell you about stuff like that. He's over there trying not to laugh, so that he didn't mess up the video. But I know exactly what he's thinking of right now. But too many people, because the world does not provide opportunities for for everybody to have real world experience, but everybody thinks it's so cool they want to teach it. And if they just go to enough classes, then they feel like they can pass on this information with some, degree of credibility. But the thing is, it's not their information; it's somebody else's information. Now, if you're an engineer and you're math based, okay, that's different. Okay, you work the math, you know the math, right? But real life situations, it's a lot different. And we have too many people in the preparedness world, and the martial arts world, and the shooting world, and all these things that everybody thinks are super cool right now, teaching things that they've never done. They've learned it from somebody who, in many cases, learned it from somebody who also had never done it. Okay, how do you get to go to a person and find out if they've really done it? It's hard because even you go to military and police, there's too many out there that just never done what they're teaching. And then when you get people who have not been in either of those disciplines, well, none of them have done it. Okay, so I don't really mean to crack on these people because I think their heart's in the right place. I think they're wanting to do what's right. I think they're wanting to pass on information. And if they have opinions, I'm not going to disagree with opinions because an opinion is an opinion. It's something that somebody thinks. It's not based, well, it can be based on things, but if it's not based on experience, it doesn't have to carry the same weight as an opinion that has been based on experience, if you understand kind of what I'm saying. Anyway, my point on this is there are a lot of things out there that you want to know, you need to know. But you have to be selective, and people need to be more selective in who they choose to learn from, because you may not be learning. Just because you pay to go to a class, you may not be learning. You may just be hearing what somebody else is telling you, and you don't have any idea the validity of it. Okay, so I will leave it at that. Just be careful. Check out backgrounds of people that you pay money to. See what they, and you also need the ability. This is a very important preparedness lesson. You need the ability to be discerning. There are so many people out there that they just they're impressed with a loud delivery and an authoritative voice and stance, and if you can't discern, authenticity, you're already in trouble. So practice on that. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Those you guys with experience in this stuff, put your comments below. Share it with the other people because they can learn from your comments as well. And anybody out there, it was not my intent to offend anyone, but I'm going to tell the truth, and this comes from my experience. And if you want experience, go get some, but don't confuse training with experience. And don't confuse a class necessarily for training. Even that. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave it at that. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. One of the best preparations you can do is get experience, because then you'll be able to tell the difference between good training, bad training, no training. Y'all have a good day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.